Welcome to the Florence Foodies podcast, a place for the community where we come together, share the stories, voices, and experiences that make Florence feel like home.
Louis Hill. How you doing?
Right, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I
Yeah.
feel honored to be the first guest.
Well, you shouldn't necessarily because you are part of the catalyst to this whole entire thing. But I'm gonna get into that here in a minute. So before we get into all of that good stuff, though, why don't you give us a little background? Because I don't think I'm even 100% sure. If I'm correct, you're not originally from Florence. You're from a neighboring area, right?
So yeah, it's kind of somewhat complex, kind of half from Florence, half not. So I did grow up in Florence County, Cartersville. If anybody out there knows where Cartersville is on Highway 76, on the other side of Timmonsville. So I did grow up in Florence County, partially in Florence.
Okay.
Yep, and then have been moved back after college and living in Asheville for a little bit, moved back here in 2017. Been here ever since.
So you were in Asheville 2006. How long were you there?
I was there for 3 years. Yep, 2014 to 2017.
How much you enjoyed that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, great food scene
Yeah.
in Asheville. Really cool place. And the weather, can't beat it.
And so you're a Clemson guy.
I am a Clemson guy, yes, and there's entirely been too much Gamecock talk on this channel, so it's good to bring in some of the other side.
Well, no apologies for that. Um, so that's a good question. What's the food scene like in Clemson? I've actually never been.
It's definitely improved actually over the last decade. When I was there, it was not, it honestly wasn't great. I mean, as far as like nice restaurants, you had Pixie and Bill's, which is a staple in Clemson, been open since the 70s. Is a really good restaurant. There was Blue Heron. But it's definitely diversified a bit as the campus has exploded over the kind of the success really of the football program over the last 10, 15 years.
So what years were you there?
I was there 2008 to 2013.
2008, 2000. So what does the average college kid at Clemson eat?
For me, it was trying to avoid Shaletter and Harcum, the two dining halls. So I was eating anything I could other than that. But you've got various places downtown. Tadara's is a kind of a slice joint. If you're gonna get wings at Backstreets, um, I'm trying to think. There's really we're really a lot of chains honestly, in Clemson at the time, it's definitely improved a little bit. You got to go with the meat and three at Esso for sure.
Okay.
Definitely like a Friday lunch special.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so our background, because obviously probably 99% of this audience wouldn't know this, was we worked together for I guess about 4 years.
Yeah, I think so.
And I was back in the warehouse, but you would come back there and we talk about a lot of things, but a lot of times we would talk about food. So mentioning that you really are the catalyst to the start of a lot of this, just so y'all know, Lewis would come back and his analysis on food was very entertaining. And so, I mean, obviously, a lot of y'all have gotten to know over the last year. I like to eat. I don't consider myself a professional or a connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination in any area, but it's almost like Lewis had a talent or a knack for analysis of food and descriptions and that kind of thing. And we really enjoyed it so much so that I proposed that I said, man, you should have a podcast.
That's right.
And my plan was I was like, you know what? We're just gonna catch this stuff in the moment because I think people would like to listen to this and put a microphone back here and try to actually just launch something organically, which there's all kind of technological reasons why that really probably wasn't going to work out. And I think we actually did try it. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was Warehouse Talk or something like that. And there was maybe 2 episodes that never saw the light of day. I don't even know if you know that or not.
No, I didn't know that.
Was nothing materialized, so that would be why. But so that kind of in the background, there were some other elements to all of this too, but that was a big driving or, yeah, big driving force behind what I've been doing was that thought process. And we've confirmed people do, they do enjoy it. They do enjoy the food review analysis whole thing. Uh, but just to kind of try to give an idea of what I'm talking about, and this is a big opportunity for you because I know you're very passionate about this subject. Why don't you tell us what your thoughts are on Diet Coke? I know it's not food, but
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I could talk about Diet Coke all day.
I know you can.
Yeah, so my wife and I are big Diet Coke obsessives, and have been for quite a while now. So, I mean, we definitely take it very seriously. And, unfortunately, that's got to be one of the worst things about living in Florence for a Diet Coke lover is, the whole Pepsi of Florence legacy here, where, like 95% of our local restaurants seriously have Pepsi products. So you're very limited. We're the type that sometimes our, um, our desire to get really good Diet Coke will actually sometimes, make us decide, oh, we're going to this other restaurant today to eat because we want a really good Diet Coke. We don't want have to get water at this Pepsi place or whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, we're going around town to hit up the best Diet Coke spots, which, for anybody who doesn't know, that's definitely Circle K. Circle K has got the best fountain Diet Coke there is typically. Unfortunately, we used to have five Circle Ks, but the two there on Second Loop are now got bought out, so there's only
Mhm.
three. So it's more difficult, but we drive, you know, as far as we need to get the good stuff. And McDonald's as well. I mean, McDonald's is also top notch. My understanding is that it's because they actually follow Coke's recommendations for how the fountain machines are set up, and getting the canisters of the syrup instead of like the plastic bags. I don't know if that's still accurate, but that was my understanding. But it makes a big, big difference, because you've got, a lot of these chains have switched over to the freestyle machines, which are just garbage. I mean, it just doesn't taste
What
right
are,
at
are
all.
those the ones with the like the
Yeah, that's like
buttons?
the touch screen where you can
Yeah.
get the different flavors. So basically, people are just prioritizing the novelty of getting the flavors and more drink options over quality. It's a gimmick over quality. And it's really unfortunate. So it is really hard, honestly, in Florence to find really, really good Diet Coke. So we, you know, we we definitely patronize the places that have it.
So that I was gonna ask that, but you kind of already said it. I was gonna ask, what do you think the difference is? Why from one fountain to another? So the two gas stations. So obviously, if Circle K has premium Diet
Yeah.
Coke, then Exxon doesn't.
Oh, for sure.
So I mean, in your mind, they're the same fountain machines, but and I know it's not the same because even I'm not a Diet Coke drinker, but it is known that I mean everybody knows that whether you like Coca-Cola or Sprite, McDonald's is premium.
Yeah. Well, I think the machines do make a difference. I don't really know some of the details of those fountain machines, and some of it's machine specific. Um, but a big, big part of it is what cup you're putting it in. I've got my Yeti right here, and that makes a big difference how
Mm.
cold you get it as soon as it goes in the cup. Um, and then another big piece is the ice. I know there's a lot of crushed ice fans out there. I think crushed ice people just like ice. They don't like the beverage. They don't care about the beverage because it's all about the cubed ice. That surface area to volume ratio prevents the drink from melting sooner, and it gives you a better, less watered down experience. It's why Chick-fil-A, you can always rely on Chick-fil-A's fountain drinks to be good, but they're never going to be great because of that, pellet ice as opposed to cubed ice. And good thing about Circle K is they typically have two machines. They usually will have a crushed ice and a cubed ice. So whatever you like, you can get, but their cubed ice makes a big difference. And sometimes it comes down to the specific machine. And again, I don't know what goes into it, but For example, the Circle K, which I used to frequent daily at the corner of Cashua and Second Loop,
Mhm.
which is now got bought out by, somebody local, and it's a busy corner. They actually took over Circle K's machines, and I thought, oh, great. I mean, I'm not going to get the app rewards, but I can still go use their machines because it comes down to that machine. Well, unfortunately, the owner decided to switch the spouts around because Circle K does, for some reason, randomly put, um, the Pepsi and Coke products all interspersed on the two machines for whatever reason. So he decided to actually change them and have a Pepsi only machine and a Coke only machine, and it ruined it. Diet Coke is in a different spout. It comes out tasting like cough syrup now. So,
Wow.
I lost that as an option.
One thing that I've thought about this a lot over the last couple years because I've not only some of the stuff we're doing here, but I've really tried to expand my own work in my own kitchen and stuff. And a lot of people don't think about how much chemistry is very scientific, all of the stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, but like I said, you were the first person that I met that really actually brought the science to the forefront. And it's like, okay, well,
That might be a
if it's a
stretch to call that a science, but
it
yeah,
is though. I mean, even what you were saying with the ice, with the surface area,
sure.
the how quick it melts, and it's really common sense
Yeah.
because the drink starts to water
Yeah.
down. That changed the dynamics, and now the whole thing's altered.
Well, I think it just kind of goes into my general mindset. I just like to take a critical approach to most things in life. I mean, it's kind of tied in a little bit to what my job is,
Yeah,
as you know, but I just appreciate that approach to everything, and then that's kind of my approach to food. And it's not about being critical just for being negative,
right.
but there's a side of the critical mindset that is, it's all about, you're searching for you're really searching for the positives. You're hoping to always have a positive
Yeah,
experience, and when you get one, you can really appreciate it more
yeah.
when you have that mindset. And that's kind of how I am with everything typically.
We're gonna talk about Florence's food scene here in a minute. I want to come back to that because that mentality, specifically what you said, always searching for the positive. That's something that's been lacking, I think, a lot in our community and really contributed to the situation that we were in because the environment becomes so hard to break through. But I'll come back to that because you highlighted Chick-fil-A, and so I'd plan to talk about this
Sure.
anyways. We haven't discussed this yet, so I wanted to save it for this conversation so it could be, like I said, authentic earlier. I did not know this until last week, early last week. I kept seeing little video titles pop up, headlines here and there, and I didn't pay it any attention at first. And it was maybe the second or third one that I saw, I guess, that I realized like, okay, something has happened. So I started doing some research, and Chick-fil-A did in fact change their recipe. And I went 3 times last week because I wanted to be certain. Plus, I'd had the flu, so I didn't eat for like a week. It didn't eat for the whole prior week, last week, pretty much. So I also was just hungry. But I went, and the first time I got a Cool Wrap and fries. Then I went back and got chicken nuggets and fries. And then just to be certain, I said, well, I'm gonna go ahead and try the chicken strips also. So I got all because the chicken nuggets were different also, like noticeably. And you've been. So I'll give you my thoughts, but I want to hear what was your take? What was your impression when you went?
Well, not good. Not good with the recipe on the fries, for sure. And I will say, for me, surprisingly, I didn't know about it going in. I actually went, I think it was last week or the week before, and got some fries because I don't always get fries. Sometimes I'm not getting a side or I'm getting mac and cheese, but I did get the fries, and I remember thinking like, these just taste off. They just taste slightly, they're less crispy, slightly, I don't wanna say stale is probably too strong of a word, but it just didn't taste fresh like I would expect from Chick-fil-A's fries, and I was like, "Huh, that's weird," and then I actually was just there yesterday and got fries again, and it was the same experience. And then that's when I looked into it and saw that the recipe changed. So it wasn't like I was looking for it. I didn't realize that the recipe had changed until after two experiences, and I feel like it's very concerning. So I actually reached out to a friend whose dad is the owner operator of a couple Chick-fil-A's here in the state, and he told me that the reason for the change, if you may already know this, was because they one of the biggest complaints they get is that their fries get cold too fast.
Mhm.
And, I get that, and that is true. The waffle fries inherently, but the shape is not going to retain heat as well. But kind of messing around with a tried and true recipe, it seems to actually have created a lot of negative buzz. So I Chick-fil-A has reversed course a little bit on things before when there's been a lot of negative feedback. So I'm hoping that happens in this case because, I'm do wonder also if there's a cost savings in here as well, because and they're just spinning it like, hey, this new recipe is going to improve the length of time that the fries stay warm. That's how they're spinning it, but you never know if that's really true or if it's a cost saving measure. And I just hope that for Chick-fil-A, that's not what it is, and that's not a sign of things to come where we're going to have a slow degradation of quality over time, because we've seen that so many places. And Chick-fil-A, with being like a standard bearer in fast food for consistency,
Yeah.
you would hope they don't go that route.
I've literally made the comment multiple times. I've probably said it to you in one of our many conversations back there in that warehouse, that all of the fast food chains have devolved since the
Mm,
90s.
mhm.
I tell my kids, I'm like, man, I hate it for y'all because the 90s was the peak of human civilization, and you'll never. They're like, oh, I'm excited to go to Burger King, and I'm like, man, that's so sad because Burger King is a fraction. It's a shell of its former self.
Well, it was never good, so
Well, we disagree on that, but definitely now, it's a far cry from what it used to be. Wendy's, the same thing. So these
yeah,
places
yeah,
and Chick-fil-A, I've said they were the only place. Like, man, it's the same as it was in the '90s. I mean, it's the only place that seemed to hold the line. And
yeah.
how they did it, I don't know. I guess it's just staying committed to their standards, even if it,
Well,
bites into their profit margin.
I think
But
a big part of it is staying private. They didn't go public. They didn't take VC money to try to explode.
mm,
Big part of it.
yeah, well, that would definitely be a good point. And just like that commitment to their standard and who they are. And I think what's happened with this, just from doing a little homework and trying to map it out in my mind, the delivery aspect has become a big part of everybody's business model. So Grubhub, what's the popular one? DoorDash, all
DoorDash,
all of
Uber
that.
Eats.
But then with Chick-fil-A, to my knowledge, other than the traditional like pizza places or Chinese restaurants, they're the first one of these fast food franchises I know of. They've got their own delivery service. So I know that I mean, how many days of the week was Chick-fil-A coming to the office? It's like two
Yep,
or three days a week.
yep.
So, and I'd be in that mix sometimes. And so I know it's a huge part of their business model. And the other thing that I know is when you did that, you were paying extra money for convenience over quality because it was really guaranteed that specifically the French fries were going to be colder and soggy.
Yeah.
And you would just hope that there's like a point where it's like, all right, well, they're not fresh, but they're edible. And then anybody's French fries, then they go into like this inedible zone. It's just like, these are terrible. And you just hope that it doesn't hit that. And usually it wouldn't, but they would be in that other area where they're not fresh. They're warm and soggy. And I'm assuming that this was a move to try to counteract that. And it was interesting to me. You said that
So
they tasted stale to you because the three times I went, texture wise, even if the heat level wasn't, I noticed it. So I thought maybe it's because I knew what they were shooting for, so it was already in the back of my mind. But I'll say, I mean, I had three experiences this last week, and each one I will say that I felt like they had achieved that. They were crispy. They felt fresh. I didn't travel with them far, but it seemed like it had worked. So they've got pea powder, from what I understand, is what they've done. They've added pea powder. I guess it's a coating, and then whenever you fry it, and it's a texture that the other thing is because you said you didn't know about it and you did notice it. for me, I'm not convinced that I would have noticed there was a difference uh, because it wasn't for me, it's not a drastic change in flavor. The best way I can describe it is it's almost like they now taste slightly watered down.
Yeah,
So they still taste like Chick-fil-A's fries to me, but there's just something missing. There's like a
yeah.
pop
It's
of
a pop.
grease basically this.
Well, I think it could be that, but it's textural. Slight. It's only, I think it's slight on the on the actual flavor, but it's for me it was textural mostly.
That's the
The
one thing
difference.
yeah, I think I may have noticed that because there is a texture to them now. And maybe I would have put it together eventually. I don't know if I would have noticed it right offhand. The thing that was interesting was, and that's why I tried a few different items. The chicken nuggets were, uh, I'm assuming they've done the same thing or something similar to them because they were almost more breadier.
Hmm.
And so I don't know what you had when you went, but there was a lot more texture and breading to them. I don't know if they were actually breaded more than they normally would,
Mhm.
but they were just very crispy. They were different.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing they've changed, they're now sourcing their chicken from a different place too.
That's correct. Yeah, I think it was a few months ago, they went from no antibiotic chicken to no antibiotics that are significant to humans or
Mhm.
something like that. It was a small change. But I saw some people talk about it tasting different. I didn't notice anything particularly with that, but it's always possible that they announce a change like that and then they make another change that they don't necessarily publicize. I don't know. And maybe that's causing a change in the taste.
It wasn't a huge turnoff,
Yeah.
but it was a slight difference, and it is concerning because I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big, and I know you are too. That's why I brought it up. A big Chick-fil-A guy, and they've got a good thing going, so you don't want to mess with it too much.
Yeah, and for me, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the Coke Freestyle machines. It's a slow degradation in quality, and to me, it's you're prioritizing the wrong thing. Um, my take on it is that if you are getting food to go or you're having food delivered, and you don't know how long that food's been sitting before you eat it, I feel like you lose the right to complain about it.
I agree.
I absolutely do not like doing takeout. I the only reason I've started doing it the last couple years since my son was born, sometimes I just absolutely have to because for convenience purposes, but I cannot stand it. And Chick-fil-A, I would not take it to go and drive home with it. Absolutely not. And
No,
I feel like them basically trying to, if that is the case, appease that market, that is very unfortunate, to make that change without really thinking about the quality of the product.
there has been a lot of negative backlash, so I think maybe it might be something they might reverse course or try to find a different path. And I agree. I mean, it's like I said earlier, you should have realistic expectations and know that when you order something through DoorDash or one of these delivery systems, that it's not going to be the same quality as it is fresh.
Mhm.
Even the stuff that I do in here, I I make a disclaimer a lot.
Sure.
I try to base like I know that I traveled with, especially if I'm coming from South Florence,
Yeah.
something like that. Then I factor that in. I'm not going to hold that
Yeah.
against them, and I knew that that's what I was doing.
Cool.
So I mean, and
Yeah.
I
And in that case, you don't really have any other option other than doing it in your car. So.
well, I've done that, and I got some negative negative feedback on that, and I had to explain that. So what you only have but so many options,
Yeah.
and I haven't done a whole lot of this going into the restaurant with mic systems and cameras. Um, we're considering doing something like that maybe in the coming weeks. A local place that I haven't been able to make it over to yet.
Okay.
But anyways, so there's you only have but so many options.
Yeah.
So with that said, just kind of shifting over because Florence's food scene is also something that we've talked about at length in the past. And then obviously a lot of what we're doing here, I've talked about a ton on this channel over the last year. I guess while I ask two questions, I'll just let you answer two. What have been your thoughts, especially from having background of living somewhere like Asheville? So like you alluded to,
Mhm.
Asheville's food scene, is just completely different level than what we've seen here. How have you viewed our food scene here in Florence over the years? And then what are your thoughts about where it's at now? What do you think is, do you feel good about where we're at now and where we're going? What are some things that you see that are going on that are encouraging or discouraging?
Sure. Well, I mean, in comparison to others, it's definitely behind. I mean, there's just no other way to state it. But I guess relative to the size of Florence, it's not bad. And especially because I mean, growing up, in the night, especially compared to the '90s and early aughts, I think we've definitely come a long way. Now we've lost some good restaurants, and especially I know I hear a lot of people older than us talk about some places around town that I never went to because they were already closed down, and they kind of mention
Yeah.
them with nostalgia. But I think that things have improved a lot over the years. Where growing up, it was like Shoney's, Applebee's, Ryan's. These were places you're going to eat on a regular basis, and we do have more local options. There is more diversity in the offerings, but we I feel like we've got a long way to go. But I feel like a lot of what you're promoting on your channel here is and within this Florence foodie community is trying to build towards that, and I think that's really important. Because it's something that I'm passionate about. I like to eat good food and have new experiences. And I think that's something that if you're, I don't necessarily have not labeled myself a foodie per se, because I feel like it either sounds snobbish um, or I feel like I'm not really qualified to use that word because I don't have sufficient
Yeah.
experience to say that. But what I think it does mean is that you're willing to, you want new experiences, you want to try new things, you're looking for something unique and really special experiences. And I think there is a growing appetite for that here, beyond just fast food, wing joints, whatever
Yeah.
it may be.
So that's a good point, and I'm actually glad you said that because I feel the same way. I said it earlier in this conversation, like I don't consider myself a connoisseur or expert on
Yeah.
any of this stuff. I think that term, we've seen this happen in culture and in other areas where terms start off meaning one thing and then they kind of
Yeah.
transition over. And for me, what I hope with this whole thing here is that our citizens, anybody that kind of gets behind this and enjoys whatever we're doing and feels like they can relate to any extent, we're not experts or because it can have kind of a snobby feel. I like what Tommy Bolger said when we went to Effie Pops a couple weeks ago. We were having a conversation. He actually said it in the clip from the video. You could see this. He alluded to this story, but where people feel like there's some elite society with coffee connoisseurs and all of that. And he's like, we're not trying to do that. We want to make good coffee, like we want to do something good, but we don't want anybody to feel out of place or like it's over their head. It's just
Yeah.
coffee.
Yeah.
To me, it's the same way with food. And whether it's in your kitchen or in a restaurant, yes, I want good food and I enjoy the analysis and getting behind the chemistry and the science of it and learning, well, what do you do to put the perfect sear on this meat and all of that stuff. I'm into all that and I've grown more into it, but it's really just an enjoyment of food. It's not so there probably are people that are much more qualified to have a title, but last time I checked, there's no PhD courses for foodieism at the university level, and so we can all take the title. So for us here in Florence, this is for the average Joe. It's blue collar foodieism. I'm gonna call it
Yeah.
that. I just coined that just now. But that's how I feel about it. So I agree with that. So we were talking about the Florence food scene, though. With that being said, what are some things that you see going on now? Because I do think that it almost feels like we kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit because I get to hear some of the stories like you with these guys. I'm like, man, I never even heard of that place.
Mhm.
But there's other places that I do remember
Yeah.
from childhood. We had these mom and pops locally owned places where, if I recall correctly, I mean, obviously I was a lot younger, was born in the late '80s, but they were a lot more predominant. And so, for example, I use this example a lot, but I used to go to Kurt's almost daily.
Mhm.
And during, you're talking about the early '90s at this point.
Yeah.
And locally owned German delicatessen. We don't have anything like that anymore. I think we lost a lot of places. You had, I guess, the Grotto, and
Mhm.
just different places, and it seems like that died off coming into the 2000s, and it was the rise of the chain restaurant.
Yep.
And now it feels like we're just now really getting back to this place. I think Victor's held the anchor for a while.
Yep.
Of course, you have Percy's and Redbone that have been around for, they maintained from back in the 90s.
Yep.
But there's been this rise, I guess maybe over the last 7, 8, 9 years of mom and pops constantly popping up.
Yeah.
And so it does feel like we're shifting over to a different season. But what are some things, maybe a specific restaurant owners, investors, or projects, anything that you see going on that you think are really contributing and are going to contribute to more of that development?
Well, I think two things from a general level is first you've got what you talked about. You've got those sort of some of those chains dying off, and millennials as a generation, they're not the punching bag now. It's Gen Z, but previously millennials were the punching bag generation. But now it you can kind of see that one thing I think that has been really great about our generation is recognizing some of those chains that we were raised on and seeing, wait, this chain restaurant, I mean, I'll just use Applebee's as an example, which doesn't exist in Florence anymore. I'm going here, and as a kid, yeah, I liked it. It was good food, but once you get older, you realize, wait, I'm paying much higher prices for microwaved, essentially fast food, when if I could go to this local place that have much better quality and I pay the same amount for it. So I think that's one big thing, getting rid of that middle ground of those types of restaurants. And then I think you have more of an acceptance of all types of food, all types of cuisine, and kind of like a coming together between the high and the low, right? You had There's more acceptance for food that isn't necessarily haute cuisine, or like Michelin star restaurants, whatever it may be. Like barbecue. If you see the explosion in barbecue culture, for example, and people taking that real seriously as like one of the important cuisines in the U.S. Um, so I think things like that actually help a little bit, because it's something that I would urge people to do. If you have this idea about certain restaurants being like, oh, that's too fancy for me, or I don't know anything about that, I wouldn't know what to order. I would just say go out of your comfort zone and go try things. And on the flip side, if you're a person that's like, oh, I would never go into this gas station and get food. It's like, no, you should step out of your comfort zone and go try it. Somewhere like Coit Street,
Mhm.
that you had on your channel recently, or one of my favorite burgers in town, um, Old Del May, for
Yeah.
example. You're gonna have these new experiences, and I think having these different things like that, and having lots of diversity, and the high and the low, a mixture of that is really good, and we're seeing that a little bit in Florence. But really, for me, s- talking Florence specifically, with the food scene, I have to say it kind of starts with town hall, um, because I feel like it's just really nice that we have a restaurant of that caliber, of that level of quality here. It's the caliber of restaurant that you're going to expect to see when you go to bigger cities, when you go to Charleston or Greenville or wherever it may be. It may not be now. Those cities may have 50 or 100 restaurants as good or better than Town Hall, but I don't know that people maybe really truly appreciate what we have in town hall, because it's part of the Indigo Road Hospitality Group, which started in Charleston about 15 years ago with Oak Steakhouse. And if you could just listeners out there, if you just want to go to their website and just look at the restaurants in their group, and look at, because they actually have it broken down by city, and look at where their restaurants are located: Charleston, Raleigh, Charlotte, Greenville, Atlanta, Nashville, DC, Jacksonville, Florence. One of those is not like the others.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
that's
a really big deal.
I mean, yeah, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe people do truly appreciate it. I mean, I think they do well. But there's a level of experience and a quality of service that you can get there, and I think it's a good jumping off point for people that wanna go try some new things, because it's still very much rooted in Southern cuisine for sure. That's the basis of their menu. But you can go on their menu and it's, their menu's rotating, it changes. They have some classics and staples that have always been there, but you can go try new things and it's interesting because typically for me, if a restaurant becomes a favorite of mine, it's typically because I found one or two things on the menu that I can go to over and over, and I don't even really have that there, honestly, other than maybe an appetizer. It's it's I get different things on their menu, and I've never been disappointed. Even if something doesn't even sound like something I would normally like, I've ordered it and I've like, wow, the way they prepared this is not what I was expecting, and it was really good. So to me, that's number one, and I would say beyond that, I gotta of course, we gotta mention Victor's as you already did, and what I'll highlight with Victor's because I think this is maybe been slept on and people don't know about it, but it is a great venue for events and catering. I will
Mm.
shout out the team there, Ashley Hill, no relation. She's done a great job with an event that we had. I just think, their food and their catering is really good in addition to what they're serving in the restaurant. And the real secret is their bakery, the cakes that they make. I've gotten ordered 3 or 4 cakes from them. And I mean, to me, that's the best I've had in town as far as like getting a really nice cake for a special event, a birthday, or whatever it may be. So that's definitely something I wanna highlight because I don't know that people think, "Oh, let me just call Victor's and order a cake for the weekend," but they are really good and look really good as well. And then I gotta, of course, mention Il Buon Gustaio, which, you've highlighted on your channel many times. Another restaurant I feel like we're really lucky to have, Alex here in town to
Yeah.
have that restaurant. I love Italian food and, homemade pasta. You're just getting an experience here that you can't, that's, you wouldn't necessarily expect from Florence. I think those are the big three as far as if I have somebody coming into town, a guest or something, and we want to go to a nice dinner, it's going to be one of those 3 places. I know I don't have to I know I'm not gonna be embarrassed
Yeah.
taking somebody there. But, I'd also mention, Damasimo. I think while they're not cooking food at Alex's level as far as, like, the specials and some of the, really high-end cooking, high-end level dishes. I think that I love some of the pasta dishes they have on their
Mm.
menu. I think they have the best Caesar salad in town. I love their desserts. So definitely mention them. And of course, Seminar now under Elliot Moss and soon to be Elliot's. They're still in their transition phase, I guess, but that's already a favorite.
Yeah.
And I think we've just basically hit the tip of the iceberg with hopefully with what they're going to be doing over there. So that's still the to me the most exciting thing happening in town. So a few others, like I gotta mention Sunday House, Dino's Grill, closest restaurant to my house. So we eat it a lot, but I think they do a phenomenal job, honestly, for that. As far as Florence, we've got a lot of great restaurants like that. I don't know what you call them, greasy spoons, whatever. I guess that sounds like that's like a negative take, but I mean, I just feel like the what the Greek community specifically has added to the Florence food scene is
Yeah.
something that is really special and should be, celebrated. I mean, their Greek salad is phenomenal. Their, grilled chicken, gyro. I think that there's that Ziki sauce at Sunday House is like the best I've ever had. I mean, I think it's like world class. It's so good.
Mhm.
Um, love what they're doing at Flavors of India. of course. Heroes Hideout Ramen, some kind of you know, under the radar spots.
Yeah.
So there's plenty. Oh, and Rebel Pie. I gotta mention Rebel Pie, the best pizza in town to me by far. That's something that our scene definitely needs more of, as you've highlighted before. Um, so yeah, I'd say that's a without naming too many places, I'd say that's a pretty good start of some
Yeah.
of my favorites in town. And I guess the last thing I'll mention before we move on would be the Florence Food and Wine Festival is coming up the end of March, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I do think that you know, speaking of, things that are being slept on, things that are kind of under the radar, it's a big event. So it's not totally under the radar. There's definitely people in town that are going to these events. A lot of them sell out. But I think it should be more well known because I think it's a really, really big deal. I think it's a top-notch festival. I think that what they put on is really, really impressive for Florence. I mean, just look at the previous, um, I guess headliners, VIPs, whatever they call it. I mean, you've got the recently deceased Natalie Dupree, you've got Chef Katie Button, Vivian Howard, and now we have local legend Rodney Scott. I mean, it's that those 4 right there in a row. I mean, that you're talking about a really big deal, who's who of, like, Southern cooking, and, the different events that they have going on. I mean, because if you're like, "Okay, I can't spend the money, or I'm a little out of my comfort zone to go to, like, the Final Pour," the big event they have under the tent there at the FMU PAC. I totally get that. Well, check out like one of the wine strolls, or the meat and meander. You're just walking around downtown eating various grilled
Yeah.
meats. So they have different types of events. The grand tasting, that's an opportunity to try a lot of different, highlighted items from places all over town.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily just, you know, high-end cuisine. You've got all kinds of different restaurants that are at that event. So I would just, encourage people to check it out because it is the event of the year for the Florence food
Yeah.
scene by far.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a really big deal. I got to go out last year, um, and that was really cool. But it's like you said, anytime that you can take these big name people and then bring them into our market, and then you have a lot of our local talent alongside of them,
Hmm.
it's just I think it's a good opportunity for growth and exposure. And you never know what happens when these guys get in a room together. They start having conversation and networking amongst themselves, and
Absolutely.
you never know what that turns into. Or who says, "Well, I want to get into that market in Florence." And I mean, I think that Florence is primed, or has been being primed and is priming to be a place that if I was a chef, if I was a culinary professional, uh, I I would start to look at Florence and see everything that's going on in that
Hmm.
community, or this community in this case, and say, I'd like to take my talent there because it's just a different approach. You mentioned a lot of these cities, with Indigo Road. So if you've got Charlotte or even Charleston, somewhere like that, then you can dive in and kind of try to throw your weight around. And there's a lot of other competition. There's a lot
Yeah.
that's already happened.
Hmm.
You come into a place like Florence and you can blow the lid off of a place, really.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, that's just my
Absolutely. Yeah.
view on it,
Definitely.
because the people are continually being prepared, and things like Florence Food and Wines are really big deal. It's a big part of that, to open their minds, to expand their palate, to consider things they wouldn't have, and even just to being exposed to what you can do with food. I mean, food is creation, and it's still growing. I mean, I don't think we've explored everything that God's given to us at our disposal as far as food goes. There's
Yeah.
still new creations to be made, and you've got highly qualified, highly skilled, highly trained people, um, whatever that looks like for them. It doesn't even have to be formal education, but just people that understand how to make good food,
Yeah.
that are playing around and tinkering with things and
Yeah.
trying to create new stuff. And a lot of them are starting to either emerge here or come into the area.
Yeah.
And even in an event like that, where the folks, the organizers, are bringing people into the area, but then it's happening even outside of Florence Food and Wine. And
Yeah.
so Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I've obviously talked about it at length here on this channel, but very excited about the development and what's going on. But my mentality has always been that the focus could be the restaurateurs, the chefs. That's obviously important, but it really starts with the people. There's got to be an audience for them
Yeah.
to cook for, and I think that's where a lot of the shift has been happening. And I don't know what the cause of that is. I don't know if I had to guess, I'd say it's an amalgamation of things. One is the internet. So our food scene was drab, coming through the back end of the 90s and then the early 2000s. But then you had the rise of the internet where computers were in everybody's household. Then now you have handheld devices over the last 15 years and people have access to everything. So, if you're like me, you're sitting there and you're watching food from Chicago and New Jersey and
Yeah.
Pakistan. You're seeing all of this different food and now you have the opportunity to be provoked a little bit,
Yeah.
So that's part of it. I think our people have been getting more exposure just by way of technology, but then also the influx of people from other areas. And so just
Mhm.
by nature of my profession, I mean, and we talked about this earlier, but I got 2 calls in the last couple of weeks from people from both of them outside of South Carolina, and then both of them in different parts of the country that are moving here. We're looking for a home for them. And so that's been going on. I mean, just me alone have been able to see a lot of this over the last year,
Yeah.
but that would certainly be indicative of a bigger picture. There are people coming from all over the place.
Yeah.
And so their mentality is not like, that stigma that we've carried.
Mhm.
Well, you've got people that, you were talking about somebody earlier from New Jersey. They already know what's up. So I
Yeah.
mean, they're coming here
Yeah.
and saying, "Man, this is lacking X, Y, or Z." And even if they don't bring it with them, so they're not going to start a restaurant or invest in
Yeah.
one, they're ready. So they're already ready to go, and all they need is for somebody to come and bring a product.
Yep.
So that element's been growing too. So
Definitely.
our own natives, I think, just a lot more exposure,
Yeah.
and that started to change some of the receptiveness, and then you got people transplants that are coming
Yeah.
from other places. And then the last thing I'll say too, this changing, which I'm excited about because I see this happening. But you made a comment earlier in this conversation about looking for something positive. I'm not going, when I say that I'm critiquing, it was not for the purpose of being critical. It's just you critique it. This is how this dish is constructed. These are the elements that really separate this dish from being excellent, what it can be, to just
Yeah.
being mediocre or worse.
Yeah.
And when you understand that, that's just kind of how you're analyzing a dish when you're eating food. It's just becomes natural. You just view food that way. But you do have people that just seemingly want to bash something. They want to be negative, or because something's not what they're accustomed to, they'll say, "Oh, this is terrible." I'll give you an example. You mentioned rebel pie. And so that Neapolitan style pizza is not my go-to. It's not, and I remember going there way back, and which was my first time, and making the comment to you about that.
Yep.
But I also was able to parse out the quality of
Mhm.
the pizza though. And I
Sure.
also said that. I said, the quality and ingredients, I mean, I could tell the freshness, the quality and ingredients may have been the best that I've found so far in Florence for
Yeah.
quality of ingredients on pizza.
Sure. Oh, for sure.
And being able to separate that from, but this isn't really the style of pizza that's my go-to.
Mhm.
And I think what a lot of our people a lot of times have just subconsciously just had a mentality that not being able to do that part.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, this isn't what I'm used to or what I like. So therefore, this is garbage.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not garbage. It's actually really good
Yeah.
food. It's just not what you prefer stylistically. And so my hope is that a lot of that's changing. And that's been like a low key initiative of mine and doing what we're doing
Mhm.
is to seduce in, like to draw in an
Yeah.
audience that's coming just for some entertainment. But low key, what I'm doing on the side is trying to just expose you to, hey,
Yeah.
stuff's different than what you're used to. And you still might not like it, but starting to really have an appreciation for the art of food. Like,
R
you know what? I don't really prefer this, but at the same time, I can detect this, and this about this and tell that this is actually a quality product
Yeah.
that's being put out.
Well, and that's the first step really of criticism is what you've gotta explain what it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of step one before you even get to anything else. So,
Right.
and going back to something you said towards the beginning of that, um, the with the talent and the people, it takes a little bit of both, and sometimes it's just pure luck. Like, okay, we get a family that moves here from Hawaii. What do we get? Aloha Kitchen.
Yeah.
Or you have just a talented individual that is working hard and like um honing their craft, their art, and you get something like Palmetto Bake Shop. And
Yeah.
I think that you have places on a small scale, maybe kind of niche places, and that's totally okay. Not everything has to appeal to everyone.
Right.
And I think getting to that point and getting some of those places is, but how do you, of course, on the business side, how do you make that work?
Yeah.
Is definitely of course a big deal.
So I got to ask you about this because the the burger ranking thing was never, just for the record, it was never planned to be what it became or has been
Mhm.
becoming. It honestly was just something on a whim. It wasn't even like it was initially. It wasn't even supposed to be a ranking. That wasn't even the plan at all. And then we started doing it, and I started getting feedback. I mean, literally bumping into people in public, and people that know my mom, that restaurant owners. Hey, tell Sam to come. So it's like it just turned into this whole thing. And so when you got something, you just roll with it.
Yep.
So if they're enjoying it, I mean, I enjoy it, so that's fine. Then the list started getting longer, and I was literally sitting in here and I'm looking at the list and I'm like, man, this list is starting to get long the more that we do this. And I was like, the people that are not high on this list are going to be mad at me because it's starting to, it takes a certain look. And I've
Sure.
said multiple times, so far, there's not one burger that I've had on that list. I think it's like 17 now or something like that.
Yeah.
I haven't had one yet that I would not eat.
Got
That
a
I
few
did.
out here.
Oh, you got it. All right, well,
Yeah.
good.
What was
So
yours for reference?
it is, okay, 17, that was good.
Yep.
So, I haven't had one yet that I said, "Oh, I wouldn't eat this."
Yeah.
And honestly, if I had, I would either A, say that, or B, that video would have never saw daylight because 'cause I'd have been like,
Sure.
"I'm just gonna not," because
Yeah.
I'm not really, out to harm any of our local businesses. In fact, just the opposite, while still being true to telling the truth as I see it. So, this is a strange tightrope to try to learn to walk.
Yeah.
I'm still working on that, but, um, I wanna I got something I want to share because I went to one of these places yesterday, and I actually want to mention it. I want to talk about it because I think it's important to emphasize this reality. I think it's just it ties into everything that we're talking about with our community. But before I do that, I know you've got some thoughts on this. So, what are your thoughts on this ranking,
Yeah.
this list?
Well, when you started yours, of course, mine isn't necessarily based on, I go and eat a specific burger, and then, give a ranking for it. This has sort of been what my experience has been over the years, even though some of these I've newly tried since you've done that. I've got about 25 on here on my own ranking. And just starting out, it's something that we've talked about a lot, speaking about probably like a warehouse rant that I went on many times at work. But I am not a smash burger fan.
Yeah,
I like thick burgers,
yeah,
whatever. And I think I've even referred to the smash burger craze in the US as a scourge. uh so but I will say, and I've come around maybe a little bit. That I just do not prefer a crispy taste and texture on a burger. I want it to, thicker where you're tasting the meat is still really juicy. I don't want it dry,
yeah,
of course, which is something that can be a potential issue when you have a thicker burger patty. But that's the big thing, and that's why I highlight, for number one for me is Seminar's burger, and I'm talking about the blue cheese burger, and which you've highlighted on your
yeah,
show here. I think was really phenomenal, and that was simply just based on that one first experience I had with it. I thought, wow, it really blew me away, and so clearly I'm not necessarily comparing the specific version, like getting the same burger every place and comparing them. But to me, the other 2 best in town from a more just traditional perspective is Old Delmay and Circle Fountain. I mean, just Florence
Yeah.
staples, Florence classics, but they just make the burger exactly what I want from it. It's got a really good flavor, and I get mine plain with just cheese at both places because I don't need anything else, because the meat, you have the magic in the melt with the cheese, and then you have the flavor of the meat, and that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, I get burgers with plenty of with other toppings and stuff all the time, but if you can do that plain cheeseburger really well, that's when I know that you've got a really good burger.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of places in town that call their burgers smash burgers, but
Right.
they're not really true smash burgers in the way that Buddy's is.
Yeah.
Because, Buddy's, I I love what they're doing as a business, but I just couldn't get past that real crispy texture on the burgers. All the other ingredients were there, but then a few months ago, I went and tried it again, and I realized, wait a second, why don't I just ask them if they'll just cook my burger less crispy? And then I did, and ever since then, I just ask them that, and I get various levels of pushback from whoever's taking my order about, well, that's the whole point, is that they're crispy. I'm like, well, I know, but if you could just do a little bit less, because I think that all the rest of the burgers, I mean, the way their cheese and sauce kind of, does a, magical melt experience
Yeah.
with the patties, it is really good. So I've definitely improved their ranking. There's a smash burger like that's never going to be at the top, but
Yeah.
um, I think that there's a lot of other, I mean, Town Hall, which we mentioned, that's just, it's just good. They just know what they're doing.
Yeah.
SC Real Foods, Peckaway Cafe Burgers, George's in Timmonsville. That's a
Yeah.
classic for me growing up. Really, really good. And Locals. And that's a key, Locals, George's, Circle Fountain, Old Delmay, Little D's Dugout. They're all doing those same style of
Yeah.
burgers that I think is, to me, that's what a burger is.
It is. That's a classic style.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of it comes down to, with this ranking. I mean, the thing is, too, what I'm doing is you got one shot. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to separate out my historical view on whatever that is, and
Sure.
I'm going to rank this
I think you have
one.
to do it that way.
And the thing about that is you're subject to whatever happens that day. So I was telling you earlier, I went to Buddy's yesterday,
Hmm.
and like I said, I'm not throwing them under the bus because I got them number one on my list. But yesterday's experience, had that just been ice in a vacuum where I was going to use that experience to rank them, it would have been uh I think it would have been 15th, and the three below it would have dropped down. I think, yeah, I'm thinking 15th
Wow.
because it just wasn't. I don't know what it was yesterday, but it just wasn't. It didn't do it for me. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and that does happen, and for the ranking purposes, you have to do it that way. But we've talked about this, and I certainly like to try to give restaurants another chance. It may not be immediately, but I rarely ever would just write a restaurant
Right.
off after trying it one time.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at too. Like I think sometimes people are quick to you go into place and like, oh, that's stuck. You gotta give them a few tries. Probably try a couple different menu items
Yeah,
too to really make sure you understand what they can do and what they can't. Uh, so that was just why I wanted to highlight that because it happens.
yeah,
So, but it sounds like though some of the places you have. So I mean, I've got Del May high on my list. I've got George's high on my list. SC Real Foods Seminar, of course, is high.
yeah. I mean, I
Um,
think we really do have a lot of overlap. In all honesty, I think you haven't done Circle Fountain yet, but and
yeah,
that's obviously a very different and unique experience.
yeah.
But
I've had a lot of requests on that
yeah,
though,
yeah,
quite a few. So interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, I am a smash burger fan. So, and you're right, and I've said that in multiple videos. Some people are calling it a smash burger, but it's not, and it's very tricky. I mean, I've tried to make them at home, and I'll just be honest, I have not been able to dial it in yet.
yeah,
So you've got Google Foods actually did a whole video on this a couple days ago. I saw it a couple days ago. I don't know how old the video is, but and he took a 93.7 and like a day. 85-15 and an 80-20 or something like
Mhm.
that, and tried all to compare all of them, and use the same method of smashing them. And it's tricky, man, because when you're making the burger that thin, and like you said, you don't want to dry it out completely. It's a very specific science, and I think usually Buddy's has nailed it. It's like the one I had yesterday. It didn't really. It was kind of dried out, and so it didn't really work out. I don't want the burger dried out either. I do like the crispy edges, and so things that it brings those elements. But you've got to season it right, and you got to cook it just right. It's very finicky,
Yep.
and I do think that Buddy's is the only true smash burger in town. And we had that one experience yesterday, but that's what I'm saying. The consistency,
Yeah.
nobody's gonna bat 100%. The 10 years of working in restaurant industry, plus I cook in my own kitchen. Anybody that cooks can tell you you're not gonna bat 100%, but they do a really good job. It's the only true smash burger in town, in my
Yeah.
opinion, that I've found so far, other than Freddy's frozen custard is probably another one. That's
Sure.
fast food joints, a little different. Um, Somebody told me the other day they like Freddy's better than Buddy's. I was like, "Oh, you're crazy.
I
I
don't know
don't, I
about
don't know
that.
about that." Yeah.
Yeah. Another controversial topic I feel like I want to bring up. We got to talk about Publix. So this has been an ongoing saga. Are they coming? Are they not coming? Who knows? It's difficult. Depends on who you ask. So one person who claims to know somebody says it's definitely happening. Another person says no, it's definitely not happening. I at the end of the day, I'm not gonna believe it until I see construction start.
Yeah.
But the of course the rumor is they're building across from Sneed, but we've heard that for a couple years now, and they haven't started construction. So I
Yeah.
really don't know what's going on. Um, the news of the second battery plant not opening is probably not going to help matters any.
Yeah.
Um,
Saw that the other day.
but, one question I have, if anybody out there can answer this for me, it would be great. Because I've seen a lot of people talk about, oh, we don't have enough population. We don't have enough this and that. Well, why does Greenwood have one? Greenwood's not even a metropolitan area. It's a micropolitan area, part of the Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson combined statistical area. They have less than 100,000 people. Florence is a 200,000 person metropolitan area. And how can it be based on people? We have the population. There's much smaller places in Florence that have Publix. I don't know if it's just our volume of existing grocery stores, because Greenwood also has a significantly less average um uh you know income per capita
Mhm.
than Florence. So if anybody out there has an answers why they think it hasn't happened yet, I would love to know, because I think it would definitely add value
Yeah.
to the community.
Yeah. No, I'd like to know too, because there has been a lot of confusion. You're right. It's for every person that says it's definitely not coming. There's somebody that says it definitely is, and it was you that pointed out to me. I guess this has been a couple years now. When there was that ad on Indeed.
Yeah, for the construction superintendent.
Right. So I mean
Yeah,
that, unless that was a hoax, which I guess somebody could be playing a joke. They know this is a topic of conversation. I mean,
yeah,
I guess you could put a ad on Indeed as a joke. I got you, but I would imagine that probably wasn't the case. So that seemed to be indicative, like, yeah, this is definitely happening. So yeah, I would like to know too, definitively, is it happening? And if so, or if not, why wouldn't Florence be an option?
yeah.
So I'm going to ask you this question. This is our
Okay.
last question. What would you say is your favorite item, food item? This is going out to eat, um, from a restaurant in Florence, and I'm going to tell you how
Mhm.
I want you to try to gauge this. I think this is the best way to do it, because I know if it was me and you asked me that question on the spot and I wasn't prepared for it, I've given this thought. It would not be easy for me to answer. I'm like, man, I don't know my favorite. So the way that I evaluate myself to keep myself honest is I say, okay, well, Sammy, what do you eat the most? What is your most frequently bought item in Florence? And for me, the answer would be the carnitas dish at Salsa y Limon. So over the
Yeah.
last probably 4 years, I have definitely purchased that particular dish, that
Mhm.
particular item, well above and beyond more than anything else in the entire city,
Yeah.
entire county.
Okay.
So that's how I would parse that out.
Well, the carnitas tacos at Salsa y Limon would definitely be high up on my list, but I'm not going to say number one. All right, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I am going to give you two answers. All
That's
right.
fine.
So I am gonna tell you. All right. So if I'm purely basing it off of what I order the most, I've got to go with the Sunday House Greek grilled chicken salad. As I mentioned to you, it's the closest restaurant to my house. We pick it up all the time, but I really love I love that salad. And that's the thing is that they're just using a basic salad base, but it's always the ingredients are always fresh. Their grilled chicken's phenomenal, but it's all about that dressing. That house made Greek dressing they have is absolutely phenomenal. All right, so the second answer, because it's more so what I think of as being like a wow, this is a really special item, and it's a chance to highlight another restaurant. I gotta go with the crab cakes at Effie Pops.
Mm.
They rarely have them. Back when they were a dinner restaurant, they would have them occasionally throughout the year. And now that they're, doing breakfast and lunch, they will occasionally have a crab cake sandwich at on their lunch menu as a special, but there's like no filler in those crab cakes. There's nowhere around here that makes crab cakes like that, and I make it a point to go there to get them when they have them as a special.
Mm.
They are phenomenal.
That sounds good. I haven't had that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was I?
Hopefully, putting this out there, hopefully they'll see this and be like, hey, you know what? We need to get those on the menu more often.
It's the crab. I was thinking I just had a crab cake somewhere that I did enjoy though. It was Julia Bell's. They
Okay,
got the
yeah,
crab cake,
that
the hollandaise, the Benedict. Yeah, that was actually really good, and I'd never had that either. So I'm gonna make it a point to try that next time that they're running that over there. So okay, yeah,
yeah, no,
good,
it's
yeah,
phenomenal. You
good
should.
answers. Nice. Do you got anything else you want to?
No, no, other than just, thank you for having me on the podcast. And I just love what you're doing with Florence Foodies. I think it's great for the community. And I hope you can be a positive force and influence.
Well, I appreciate that, and like I said, you were a big influence in all of this. So really, behind the scenes, I'm in my mind, I'm almost partially doing what I thought you should have done at a certain point in time. So I'm honored and glad that you could come on and be part of this first episode, and hopefully, it'll be something that will do well and that we can do again.
All right. That sounds good. I'd love to be back.
Appreciate it, Lewis.
All right. Thank you, Sammy.
All right, well, that is our first Florence Foodies podcast episode. So hopefully y'all enjoyed it. I enjoyed sitting down, taking this time with Lewis, catching up, conversing a little bit about food in our community. And we'll look forward to seeing y'all on the next episode.